G'day mate, Matty Graham here from Exponential Performance Coaching. Welcome back to another Whiteboard Wednesday. In today's video we are going to be doing the second of our 3 energy systems in our energy system series. And today we're going to be looking at the anaerobic glycolytic energy system. Come check it out. So, the anaerobic glycolytic energy system, this picks up after that ATP PCR energy system that we covered on the last video. It's another one of our high intensity energy systems that produces energy without oxygen, hence the anaerobic part of that. Now, it's often called a couple of different things depending on what textbook you're reading and what country you're from. It's often termed the anaerobic lactic system because of the lactic acid that it produces, and anaerobic glycolysis is often used interchangeably as well. Now if we have a look at the word glycolysis, because glycolysis literally means the splitting of sugar. So glyco meaning sugar or glucose, and lysis meaning splitting. So what we're dealing with here is the splitting of sugar. And we just happen to be doing that anaerobically at this stage. Now, glycolysis has 2 components to it. The anaerobic component, which we're going to talk about today, and then also an aerobic component to further split that sugar down, and we'll talk about that in the next video. So, we're only dealing with carbohydrate in this video. So, either as blood glucose here, as sugar circulating around in the blood, or here, muscle glycogen, sugar that's stored in the muscle. Now this is not a very efficient energy system. Within a couple of these arrows here, there's actually about 10 different pretty complex enzymatic reactions that happen to produce the energy. But what it allows us to do is get some energy relatively quickly for a relatively long period of time as well. So if you look over at this graph here, thinking about energy production up the side here, time along the bottom, this red line can be thought about as our ATP PCR energy system. We get a lot of energy very quickly, but it doesn't last very long. This blue line here kind of picks up, and this is that anaerobic glycolytic energy system. We get quite a lot of energy relatively quickly, but you can see again it doesn't last all that long as well. About 10, so the end of the ATP PCR energy system, to about 120 seconds, which is where this is sort of maximally engaged. As you can see, this line drops down and keeps going for a long period of time as a little bit of an underlying energy production to support the aerobic energy system there in the green, and we'll talk about that in the next video. So let's have a look at this. We've got blood glucose up here in the blood. That's what this red sort of pathway is. Sugar circulating around in the blood. It enters the cell. What we need to do then is transform this glucose into what we call glucose 6-phosphate, and what that does is it keeps it in the cell, doesn't let it escape back out. And this is also where glycogen comes in as well. Glycogen is broken down into glucose 6-phosphate, and then we're ready to make some energy. This first part here, we have to actually put in, we have to spend 1 ATP dollar, if you like, to get this process to happen, and then we actually spend another dollar of ATP in this process here. And this is that part where I said there's about 10 different enzymatic reactions happening in here. So it's quite complex. And if you are a student studying for biology or exercise physiology or chemistry, this is probably not the video for you. I've targeted this video at the coach, the athlete, general understanding versus those really specific enzymes that play a part in here. But out of this process here, we get 4 ATP. So we get $4 out, if you like. We've had to put $2 in, so if you can imagine, we balance the books out here, we're left with 2 ATP in total. So you've got to put 2 in, but you get 2 out, you get it relatively quickly, and when you're doing really hard exercise and you don't have enough oxygen available because of the work rate, you can still get some oxygen. So pretty good, but it's not overly efficient. And then what we're left with is down here, it's called pyruvic acid. Now, this is a kind of fork in the road when it comes to metabolism. there's not enough oxygen available because you're working so hard, you need energy very quickly, and you're huffing and puffing, you can't keep up, then what's going to happen is lactic acid is going to be produced just to get rid, or to clear the system, if you like, because we don't want that starting to build up in our body. So we end is lactic acid. Or if there's oxygen available, it'll flow down here into the mitochondria, which is where aerobic metabolism takes up. We're going to talk about aerobic metabolism in our next video, but what we'll talk about here is what actually happens to lactic acid, because people think lactic acid is a bit of a dead-end product and it causes all these problems. But our body's got a way of dealing with it. So what we go into now is outside the realm of actual anaerobic glycolysis. So anaerobic glycolysis happens up until this point here. If there's no oxygen available, it turns into lactic acid. That's the end of anaerobic glycolysis. This next process that I'm going to describe, I thought I'd add it in here for like a bigger picture, is called the lactate shuttle. So what happens is the lactic acid dissociates and goes into the blood. Now what dissociates mean is that it breaks into a lactate molecule and a hydrogen ion. What the body does is it takes the hydrogen ion, and using our bicarbonate buffering system, we end up breathing it out as CO2 or carbon dioxide. So pretty cool there. It goes to the lung, we breathe it out, helps balance out our acid-base balance. The lactate molecule heads on up to the liver in the bloodstream. Now in the liver there's a thing called the Cori cycle, and throughout the Cori cycle we get gluconeogenesis, which is actually the production of new glucose. And that's released back into the blood, and the whole system can actually start again. So that's pretty cool. That's the way the body deals with lactic acid at the end of anaerobic glycolysis. So that there in a nutshell is the anaerobic glycolytic system. It's really good for high intensity exercises, or those little bursts when the work rate has to go up and you cannot keep up with the oxygen demands. We produce a bit of energy, but it's quite expensive. It's kind of like getting a loan off a loan shark. We get a little bit of money quickly, but we have to pay it back, and pay it back with interest. And if we go through this system too much, or we use it too hard, so we're just running as hard as we can, we're not pacing ourselves, then eventually we're going to get a big build up over here in the blood of hydrogen ions. That's going to cause that pain in the muscles, that burning feeling, and we're going to have to slow down because we're puffing, we can't get rid of them quick enough. But if we do slow down, we pace ourselves, we're able to get enough oxygen on board, then this pyruvic acid flows down into the mitochondria and begins aerobic metabolism. And that's the cool thing about these energy systems, is one flows into another. If you remember from last video, the ATP PCR system, all the byproducts of that prepped the engine for glycolysis to occur. So let's talk about aerobic metabolism in our next video. If you've got any questions about the anaerobic glycolytic energy system, I appreciate we've tried to condense a lot into a short time. Let me know and I'll do my best to answer them. Remember, get out there and train hard, but most importantly, train smart. I'll talk to you next time.